This morning the lesson is called A Time to Love. And we're going to start in our hearts. Then we're going to make our way to our heads. And then we're going to travel that 18 inches back down to our hearts again, which is where we love to reside. That's where we really revel in being in that space. We're beginning this morning by looking at Ecclesiastes, looking at the 3rd chapter, the 1st through the 8th verses. Now, this comes to us from the Hebrew scriptures from the Old Testament. Now, the name Ecclesiastes is a translation of the Hebrew word hoheles, which means one who convenes an assembly, or a preacher, or a teacher. So that's what Ecclesiastes means. So sit back now and enjoy these words that you will probably find very, very familiar. For everything there is a season, a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Such a beautiful passage. It's moving, it's affirming, and at times it's confusing. It's confusing to those who follow the way, the teachings of the Christ, which is always a message of love, always a time for love. This passage is poetic. It's almost like a song. It actually is a song by Pete Seeger that was first released in 1959. Some of us might remember it from the 60s or the 70s or later. So Ecclesiastes was introduced to those who were not necessarily spiritual in nature when they heard the song, Turn, Turn, Turn. Ecclesiastes is the work of a teacher or a preacher or a gatherer of an assembly who lived and wrote in Jerusalem sometime after 450 before the Common Era, BCE, way before the time of Christ, when the Hebrews have returned from their Babylonian exile. And it's a time in which, according to the teacher, people were allowing concerns of their everyday living to get in the way of their spiritual life. They were allowing the everyday concerns of returning from exile to get in the way of their faith. Vanity of all vanities is how this passage begins. And in this passage, he reveals a universal truth which remains constant through all the conflicting experiences of our lives. This relates to us today as much as it did at that time. Now, metaphysically, it's interesting to note that this passage consists of 7 sets, here we go to the intellect, of 7 sets of opposite, each with 2 pairs of opposites. And I was inspired by the metaphysical interpretation by our late Unity minister, Ed Townley. in much of this. Now, from the opening pages of Genesis in the Old Testament all the way through, you find the number 7 is significant. All the way to the very last book in the Bible, the book of Revelation, 7 is significant. For the Bible recognizes there are 7 stages involved in the process of expressing spiritual truth in this human experience. So each stage is represented by the 2 sets of opposites. The first set involves birth and death, planting and reaping. That's the basics of coming into this human experience through one gate and leaving through the other. The second stage involves killing, healing, breaking down, and building up. It's a step of learning how this dualistic experience works, for we live in a dualistic world, hot, cold, up, down. The third stage is weeping and laughing, mourning and dancing, and it's incorporating our feeling nature into our physical experience. The fourth is throwing away and gathering stones, embracing and refraining from embracing. This centers us in our heart chakra, teaching that love is not just gathering, but also releasing. And I'm going to repeat that, because that's going to be a theme today. Love is not just gathering, but also releasing. In the fifth stage, we seek and we lose, we keep and we throw away, and this is our power center. This is our power center in which we begin to take ownership for our own lives. The sixth stage involves tearing and sowing, silence and speaking, opposites about creating new possibilities by claiming our spiritual truth, by speaking the word. And the final opposites involve love and hate, war and peace. And it's important to point out that both ends of each spectrum are intimately involved in the creative process that we each are here to accomplish. Each of these 7 steps, each end of the spectrum. Now we celebrate healing and dancing and embracing and love. We celebrate those. We often judge ourselves negatively if we find ourselves experiencing death, weeping, losing, or war. But to judge one extreme as good and the other as bad is to miss the essential point that the whole spectrum must be involved if we are to mature and grow spiritually as expressions of God in the fullness of all of life. That does not mean that we are to hate, to go to war, to kill. There may be parts of us that we are willing to release. We won't use the harsh word of kill. We may go to war within ourselves of our ego and our divine self. We may hate things that have happened in our lives, but we live through them, grow through them. They are not meant to express towards another outside of ourselves. Jesus, the one we humbly acknowledge as pointing the way for us to live as full expressions of God, taught love. That was his greatest teaching. Love one another. Love one another. And we still haven't gotten it. The simplest of his teachings, love one another always, in all situations, no matter what. Love one another. Now we find ourselves at times stymied by this teaching. We are to love one another in every circumstance. That's a high, high order. We are even told to love our enemies, whoever they might be. We are to love, be expressions of love, be the very essence of love wherever you go, whatever you experience. So how is that possible? How does that even work? What does that mean for me and for you today in the lives that we live and the things that we experience and the things we have experienced? What does that look like? Well, love is a complex word. It's multifaceted emotion. Many of us realized this when we had children. If we didn't have children, perhaps we had a beloved pet companion. We find that love is a complex word. For our love, or what we call love, is an attempt sometimes to protect our children from the world, from the worst, from the pain and from the suffering, from harm. Now, you've all heard the expression, as I have heard, why can't they learn from my experiences? Why can't they learn from my mistakes? Let's call them, instead of mistakes, let's call them choices. Why can't they learn from my choices? Well, we can't protect them from that, nor should we try once they reach a certain age or a certain maturity. We each have to make our own choices. Others might call them mistakes. They are our choices. And to experience the consequences of those choices, whatever they might be. Through that process, we learn to make better and better choices, wiser decisions. There is no shortcut. Loving someone does not mean preventing them from experiencing this wide, wild, beautiful, and sometimes unfair world. Let's take a poll here. How many of you bypassed learning things on your own and just learned from the experience of your elders, the choices they made? You never had to go out there on your own and figure things out. Let's see a raise of hand. Yeah. I don't think I'm only speaking for myself when I say that I had to run my life off the road a few times into the ditches before I found my lane. There were dead ends. There were detours. There were roundabouts. And detours can actually be fun if you let them be. There were side tracks. There were back tracks. Mountains and valleys. And they were mine to travel. Some of them were not what my parents would have wanted for me. They were not what my parents or my elders would have chosen for me. I seriously doubt that. And some of them were not all that much fun. I'm tempted to erase a few of them. But would I be the same person I am here today were it not for those detours and those ditches? Would you be the same person that you are here today were it not for those dead ends and those side tracks? So what is the love that the Bible speaks of? What is this love? Love is often expressed as a letting go, an allowing and honoring of the other's path, even though it may not be the path that you would choose for them at all. Love is not timid. Love is often saying, no. No, that's not okay. No, I can't be your friend right now. No, I can't be around you right now. I still love you, but cannot be a part of your life right now. No, it's not okay to treat me that way or to treat anyone that way. If it is not in your highest good, it cannot be in anyone else's highest good. I'm going to repeat that. If it is not in your highest good, it cannot be in anyone else's highest good, ultimately. You cannot be held hostage by someone else's needs or demands and call it love. Manipulation is not love. Love may be expressed in a myriad of ways. Call me or text me when you get home. That's really saying, I love you and I worry about you. There's some people in this congregation that when I fly back to Arkansas, I text when I arrive at home. Thank you, I love you too. Let me fix you something to eat. Really means I love you and I'd like to do something for you. Please borrow my car or stay in my house. Says I love you and I want to share what I have with you. Our parents, many of them did not hear I love you a lot. Our grandparents probably didn't either. It was just a different time. Maybe wash behind your ears meant I love you at that time. I don't know. I often say to my son, let me hear from you. I want to know how you're doing. And that is communicating, I love you, although I say that to him and my daughters also. What they do not hear from me is, let me pay your bills. Let me feed you. Let me clothe you. They're capable of doing that themselves now. And as adults, I must honor their path, even when it is not a path I would have chosen myself. Love does not have strings attached. Love does not include guilt. I love you, so you have to do this for me. Denny and I often joke that we're terrible about being guilting parents. You know, we complain that the kids haven't visited us for a while, and it's like, we forgot to guilt them. You know, we're just not good at that. One of the things about unity, you're not here because you're guilted to be here. We just don't do guilt. That is not love. It is not honest. It's a form of manipulation. You see, love is a much more complex word. Love might be mowing your neighbor's lawn, might be bringing in their trash cans. Love might be sending a note of gratitude to someone who's shown you a kindness. Love might be a text or a phone call to someone who's going through a hard time. Love might be a simple smile of acknowledgement and inclusion. As simple as that. Love might be not responding to a communication until you can go to your heart space so that you're not responding from a sense of defensiveness or retaliation or anger, giving yourself time to respond from a place of love, declining to allow your anger to rule. And at times, love feels turned inside out. That's how complex love is. You might be separating yourself from an unhealthy situation. After all, love includes self-love. Doing what is in your highest good. What did I say earlier? If it is not in your highest good, it can't be in anyone else's. We're going to turn that around now. If it is not in my highest good, it can't be in anyone else's. Say that with me. If it is not in my highest good, it can't be in anyone else's. Again, if it is not in my highest good, it can't be in anyone else's. Once more with gusto. If it is not in my highest good, it can't be in anyone else's. That is not selfishness. That is not self-centeredness. What do the airlines say? Put the oxygen mask on first. For when you are rested, when you are nourished, healthy, feel cared for, love flows easily and freely from you. Generosity flows naturally. Before it's coming from the excess instead of depletion. It's coming from a life filled with love and overflowing to everyone and everything you touch. Love may be giving, and remember, love may be withholding. I think some of us have a hard time with that one. Withholding may be the most loving thing you can do. Excuse me. And you only know when you are guided from the love of your heart, not from guilt, not from pulled heartstrings, but love combined with wisdom. Remember, we have both of those powers within us, love and wisdom. Love combined with wisdom will guide you. That love will reassure you. Our job is to come from that space of love in all things. It is always a time to love. Let us each find ways today and throughout this next week to be an expression of our most loving self. Love combined with wisdom. Love supported by the Most High. Love is the essence of your being and mine. It is ours to share, to give away, to express as you and as me. And so it is. Amen. God bless you.